Hello, this is Ravi. Much like all of you, I'm also a Seabrook resident and a Seabrook taxpayer, and I am bringing some more information to you this year as I have done in the past several years. And today's presentation is called Where is Your Tax Money Going? So let's get started. Let's start with the review. First of all, our property taxes fund four distinct pieces of operations. First is the municipality of Seabrook. Second one, the local schools in Seabrook and the regional high schools, and also the Rockingham County. Um, the taxpayers really have a say on the first three items. The fourth one is controlled by the state. Yeah, the people do have a say over the fourth item as well through the state representatives and so forth and through the processes in Concord. But we have a say on the top three directly through our town meetings that typically happen in March of every year, second Tuesday of March every year. And remember that at that time, when you see the ballot, you will be presented with a warrant article for each one of these three entities, which is municipality, local schools, and the regional high school, which is Winnacunnet High School in our case. There will be three different ballots, but each of them will have a warrant article on which there will be the proposed budget and the default budget, and you will be asked to vote on that, meaning whether you support the budget that's being proposed or whether you would want to vote for the default budget, which is supposed to be current year's operating budget plus any contractual obligations related increases for next year with adjustment to any one-time charges that occurred in the current year. Um, so we'll talk more about it later on, but this is what you'll be presented with, and we all have to vote on this, and that way we can tell the town how to operate the upcoming year. Now, in terms of Seabrook, our total tax levy for 2022 was in the neighborhood of $45 million, going to about $50 million in 2023. And you can see the breakdown of it. The education is a huge chunk, and I'm sorry, the video is obstructing the regional school funding piece of the pie chart call out. Uh, the municipal taxes amount account for about 48%, and the county taxes are another 5%. That means 48 and 5, that's 53. Remaining 57% of the money goes to, what is that, 48 and 553, that means remaining 47%. It goes to all the taxes, 40% to the local schools and 7% to the state or the regional schools. Now, there are some tax levy changes happening. I wanted to give you some details. If you look at your tax bill, the tax bill will be broken down typically into four pieces: municipality tax, local school tax, state school tax, and county tax. And in our case, in 2022, our municipality tax levy was in the neighborhood of about $23 million. School tax was about $18 million or so, and the state school or the regional school was around 2.4, and the county tax levy was also around 2.4, and it added up to a total of 45,400,000 and change. And this has changed in 2023, that the municipality tax levy has increased to $24,457,000 and change, and the school tax levy has increased to $20 million. The state school or the regional school levy has increased to $3.28 million or $3.3 million, and the county tax levy has increased to $2.7 million, adding up to a total tax levy of little north of $50 million. Now, this is, of course, an 8% increase in the municipality tax levy, 11% on the local schools, and 36% increase on the regional school tax levy, 10% increase in the county tax levy. Now, there is an anomaly to do with the way that we had to do some rebate to abatement to the next era tax payments for 2023 that kind of contributed to about a $2 million impact in the municipality, and that is reflected in the change on the municipal tax levy. And we'll talk more about it later. The tax rate changes that kind of follow this also takes into consideration changes to the assessed values of the different properties in the town as well. And the municipality tax levy in 2022 has been $6.31 per thousand, $5.13 for the local school, $1.13 for the regional school, and 68 cents for the county tax levy, for a total of $13.25. This is the tax rate that was used for calculating our tax bill last December, as well as the July bill for 2023. The upcoming tax bill will be based on the new tax rates, and that's what we will receive in December, that we have to send in before the end of first week, I believe, of January. So we'll have a short fuse to work with, but the new tax mailings will occur soon. I think that the DRA just signed off on this yesterday, and the new tax rate for the municipality is going from 6.31 to 704, and the Seabrook school tax levy went from 513 to 575 a thousand, and the state school went from 113 to 152, and the county tax levy went from 0.68 to 0.77, for a total of $15.08 per thousand. That means a 12% increase for the municipality tax, 12% increase for the Seabrook school tax levy, 35% increase to the regional school, and 13% increase to the county tax levy. So tax rate. So anyway, the total tax rate is going from 13.25 to about $15.08 per $1,000 of the assessed value. So what does that mean? It means in the December tax bill, when you receive it, if your home is assessed at about $400,000, you would expect to see an increase of about $366. And if you had $1 million home, the increase in your tax bill will be about $915. When I presented it at the library yesterday, people asked the question, well, is it for the whole year? Well, it's not for the whole year. The way that works is that the new tax rate goes into effect around this time, and that affects the December tax bill and the July tax bill. And then there'll be a new tax rate next fall that will affect the next year's December and the following year's July tax bills. However, this increase that happened, that is going into effect for these two tax bills, this December and next July, it means that we are going to see the first increase in on the property taxes right now in December, and the same higher tax rate will apply also into the July tax bill. So not necessarily that it will be an increase from your December tax bill, but it will be an increase from your July 2023 tax bill. So realistically speaking, the total tax increase for the year will be about twice these amounts. Now, so what can we do? Our taxes have been going up and up and up and up, and so what do we do? Well, it's not a magical thing. There are only a few things we could do. One is that we could reduce spending. Another thing we could do is to cultivate new revenue sources, so that we can pay for some of the spendings with the revenues coming in from the new revenue sources we are cultivating. Well, in Seabrook, we already have a big revenue source, and that is the NextEra power plant, which pays for a third of our tax levy. But because we keep spending more and more money, the percentage of the tax contribution from NextEra is proportionately going down. So the taxpayers are left holding the bag even more and more. And the third possibility is to eliminate subsidies. By that I mean there are several services that the town provides where the users of the services are being subsidized by non-users. So to bring more equity, if we make the users of the services pay for the services that they receive, then the remaining people who are non-users of the services wouldn't have to be bearing the burden of it in the form of the taxes that they pay. So there is some kind of a equalization that may have to be done, and we'll talk more about this also before the end of this presentation. Now, I'm going to focus the rest of the presentation on the municipal expenses only because the school expenses are really left to the school board, whether it is the local school, in which case local school board controls everything, or the regional school, in which case the regional school board controls everything. So I'm going to only talk about the municipal spending here because that's what I best understand. So here we go. The first of it is that um, let's start with the review again. I have made these points to you before that our property taxes are really our share of the town budget. Okay, let me say it again. Our taxes are our share of the town budget. Okay, there's no other way to look at it. This is as simple as that. The share, our share is calculated based on the assessed value of the properties we own. So that is, if you own a home worth assessed at a certain value, then that becomes the basis on which your share is determined. That's basically what it is. So um, so even if the assessed value remains the same for your home, if the town ends up spending more money, your share goes up. That means your property taxes go up. Now, even if the town budget is the same, if there are changes to your assessed value, that's going to change the amount of money that you pay. So both the assessed value and the town spending affect your property taxes. Often they both happen at the same time, so it's kind of hard to follow it. But the fact is, both of these two factors affect the property taxes we all pay. So the question is, when somebody says, is this true or false? Your property tax increased because your assessed value increased. Some people have a very simplistic question. Oh, your property value increased, so your taxes are going to go up. Is it true? Well, it is only partly true because if the town budget um, uh, did not go up, and if your property value went up, uh, you may not necessarily have to, if your property tax increased, it may not be all due to your assessed value. In other words, if the assessed value increased and if everybody's assessed value, the town increased and the town budget remained the same, everybody's total taxes will be the same. So when people say, well, your property tax increased because of your assessment, that's not totally true. So I just want you to be cognizant of it. Next question is, when somebody says in your town that our tax rate has been low, that should be a proof that we are running a great fiscally responsible town. Is that true? Well, that is not necessarily entirely true because you could have the same town spending and your assessed values may have gone up, in which case your tax rate will come down. And so it's not a straight one-to-one correlation there. So you have to be very careful when people throw these things around. When somebody talks to you about property tax rates, don't just buy it. Okay, ask the question, what happened to the town spending? Because ultimately you don't write a check for the tax rate, you write a check for the town taxes. Okay, and so that is what you need to pay attention to, and you need to think about what is changing, what are the root causes of the changes to your property tax bill. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about value. Okay, first of all, let's just get something out of the way. When we are looking into these details, people often think that we are somehow trying to be hard on the town employees or their ability to earn income. Believe me, that's not what this is all about. We all agree that the services that we receive from our town are terrific. The feedback has always been uniformly great. I have said this many times. I continue to say that, and I've been a direct beneficiary of it myself. So I know that town services are very good. Okay. There was a little snow dusting yesterday, 6 o'clock in the morning, and the DPW was out there salting the road. So, I mean, they are very, very, very good. Now, we deeply appreciate the men and women who work for our town. Okay. So, none of what we are saying is any reflection on our feeling toward any of the town employees. That's not what it is at all. We appreciate the good services that we receive. But it is also true to take a look at what is value for our money. Value is a ratio. It is a ratio of what we get for what we pay for. So you may get something that's really good, but the price may be too high, in which case the value will be still low. So, so value is really a ratio. So we need to really ask ourselves the question, do you want the most expensive or do you want the one that is the best value? Okay. To me, it is important that I get the best value. I don't always have to buy a $100 bottle of wine. I'll be happy to get a $10 bottle of wine that kind of tastes like, a $50 bottle of wine. I'll be happy with it. So to me, it's the value and not so much that is the most expensive thing. Now, so let's just take a look around as to, so that we can do some value comparison. So I wanted to bring some data from our neighboring towns. Here is the seacoast town with a population of about 5,600 people. They have full-time and part-time police, full-time fire, ambulance is full-time, and the water is a private aquarium. The sewer service is both municipality provide as well as private septic tanks. Trash collection, they have none of that. The municipality budget is, about $14 million, and the tax rate is only $6.98. Okay, that sounds very good, doesn't it? $6.98. So earlier I asked the question, if the tax rate is low, your town is fiscally responsible. Is that not the case? Well, here is a case where you are finding out that the tax rate is really low, but what does that mean? They only receive a partial set of services. At what cost? Well, this town, if you guessed, it is Rye. It provides a partial set of services to their residents, and it costs about $2,500 per capita for each citizen in Rye. Okay, keep that number in mind as we go further. Here is another town. Its population is 16,484. It has full-time police, full-time fire, full-time ambulance. Water is from Aquarian as private. Sewer service is municipal. Trash collection is municipal. And the municipal budget is $33 million. And the tax rate is $15.84 a thousand. Man, that sounds high. Is it a good town? I mean, are they being fiscally responsible? What town is it? Well, let's take a look. Of course, it is Hampton, a little north of us, and they provide full set of services at about $2,000 per capita. Better than Rye in terms of the value. Okay. Now, let's go further. Here is another town that has 8,438 people, provides full-time police, full-time fire, full-time ambulance, and municipal water, sewer, and trash collection. And it has a municipal budget of north of $26 million. Tax rate is $13.25. Well, this seems to provide all the services at somewhat tax rate in between. So what town is it? Yes, it is our town, Seabrook. It provides full set of services, but the cost is $3,100 per capita. So it is higher than the low tax rate Rye that only provides partial set of services at $2,500 a head, and more expensive by 50% to Hampton that provides full set of services except for the water, which is private. So, the question is it the good value for us? So when we compare these three towns, we are more like Hampton than Rye. We have the floating summer population, and we are very close to the nuclear power plant, even though the nuclear power plant has a Seabrook address. If anything were to happen to it, Hampton would be just as much affected as Seabrook. Okay, so we are both living in the shadows of a nuclear power plant, and both provide full set of services, albeit Hampton provides private aquarium water service. So Seabrook residents pay 50% more for this. Okay, So who's getting higher value? Well, here are two gas stations. One is selling the gas at 429, 449, 499. Another one is selling the same at 725, 745, 775. Well, which one would you go to? Which gas station delivers better value? Well, clearly the one that is selling the same products at a lower price. See? So that's why it's important for us to pay attention to the value. We love the services that we have. We appreciate the workers we have. We want to keep the services, but we want to lower the cost to increase the value. And so we need to look for ways of increasing the value that we deliver to our taxpayers. Okay? That is what we must do. It's not easy, but that's what people elect good people to go to the board of selectmen to do this. In fact, really, that's really the job of the board of selectmen to enact policies that will deliver the best value for the dollars that they send in the form of taxes. Now, take a little closer look at the municipality budget of Seabrook. You'll see that the employee base pay is a big chunk, okay? And that's about about 37% of the pay monies that municipality budget goes to pay for the base pay of the employees. But the employees get 31% of the municipality budget in terms of benefits, and another 10% in the form of additional pays. And a non-employee related expense is the remaining 22%. Okay, so this is the way Seabrook spends the money. Now, full-time employees pay is the 33% of the municipal budget. That's the yellow segment of this breakout pie. Okay, but there's 41% of the municipal budget goes into employee benefits and additional pay, which is only available to the full-time employees. Most of the additional pays and benefits don't apply to part-time or seasonal employees or the elected officials, with very few minor exceptions. So often it is the base pay to the full-time employees that is very visible. Okay, what is not visible are the monies that the municipality pays out in the form of additional pay and the employee pay, even though that piece is bigger than the base pay piece of the municipality budget. So the implication is this. When you see a $33 of visible spending, there's about $41 worth of invisible spending being done on employees. Often when people ask, well, how much does an employee cost, they only quote their base pay as if that's the only expense to the taxpayers. That's not the case. The taxpayers pay for the 33 plus 41, that's 74%, okay, is paid by the taxpayers. So what people often show you as the pay and what the true cost of that job function to the taxpayers are vastly different. And they are different because of this 41% that goes into the paying their additional pays and into their benefits. Okay. Now when you see contract warrant articles on the ballot, it often speaks of the COLA raises. Okay, it will talk about only the base increases, and it will also say the tax impact of this is so many dollars or cents per thousand of your property value. Well, believe me, that's only 33%. It's only talking about the 33%. It doesn't talk about the 41%. Okay, so be careful to completely understand the implications of what is visible and what is not visible, and ask questions about the invisible portions of the visible expenses that are quoted to you. Okay, many people miss that and wonder why there is a disconnect between what they end up paying in taxes and what they voted on. Okay, so you got to be smart about it. Okay. Now, if you take this whole 33% and 41% all together, and if you looked at the job functions in the town, and see how much these different job functions cost. I did that for every job function in the town and arranged the top 10 in this order. The least expensive of this is a police sergeant who makes a little bit north of about $200,000 in terms of the base pay, the additional pay, and the benefits in terms of the total cost to the employee, to the taxpayers. And the highest pay and the highest costly job that we have is the fire chief, who is paid somewhere between $300,000 and $350,000. Now, where do the firemen fall in between? They fall a little bit below $250,000. Okay, this is what is the cost of the firemen, not the any associated cost, because the firemen need to get their uniforms, their gear, their space, and everything. So all these things will cost money. But if you just look at the fireman cost of the job position for salary, additional pay, and benefits, and that is approximately $244,000 or so. But you round off with the other things, you are looking at approximately $250,000 per fireman. That's the taxpayer's cost. So just to make a point here, if you add 8 new firefighters to the fire department, you can anticipate that there will be a $2 million annual budget increase to cover their base additional pay as well as their benefits. Okay, so keep that in mind. Anytime you see a request coming for 8 new firefighters, equate that to a $2 million increase to the municipal budget. So that means municipal budget being somewhere around $28 million or $30 million, that's going to jump up, to $32 million or so. That's like a 10% increase to the budget. So in that neighborhood, and that is going to reflect directly on your tax bill. So keep that in mind. Now, so what are the employee benefits? These are benefits that the town pays on behalf of the employees to a third party so that the employees are taken care of, rightfully so. Their health plan, their dental plan, the town pays on behalf of the employees to the insurance carrier. The HRA fees, third-party administrators administer the HRA, so the town pays for it. The long-term and the short-term disability insurances, life insurances are all paid. Those premiums are paid on behalf of the employee by the town to the carrier. The town also pays the Social Security and Medicare taxes for the employee to the government. In addition to it, there is also New Hampshire retirement savings plan, and the town pays for that as well. Now, in addition to it, there is a 5% match deferred compensation, which is sort of like the 401k plan. I think it's called 457 or 427 plan that the public sector employees are given. The town provides a 5% match on whatever that they save, and so that they can have a nest egg when they retire. Now, even though it's called a 5% match, in the case of the fire chief, it's a 6.5%. And in the case of a police chief, it's 6%. Okay, these are all over time. They have negotiated these numbers up. So just so you know. Now, there are also additional employee pay categories. There's a whole bunch of things in here where employees get paid a 500 here, 300 here, 1300 here, 1500 here, 3500 here, and so forth. So there are a lot of categories like this. When they get a certificate, they get a stipend that that perpetuates year after year. That becomes a pay raise. The longer they stay, they get a bonus for staying with us, Town of Seabrook, and so that gets added to their pay every year. And they have sick leave, but they don't have to take the sick leave. They could accumulate and they can sell it back to the town, and that's called buyout. And for that, they are going to be paid hard cash. And that is another additional pay. TSOR is the temporary service order rank. If somebody steps in and serves the job of the supervisor or higher ups for a duration, then for the duration they get paid. The supervisors or what the higher up position they are filling in for, they get that person's rate during the time that they serve in that position. Many get uniform allowance, and part of the uniform allowance, people get cell phones as well, you know, and donning and doffing. There is additional pay for that, and auto allowance. Some people get, allowance. Not everybody. Once again, all these. This is like a superset of all the added employee pay categories. Not every employee gets all of them. What they get out of these is a function of what union they belong to, and other factors such as whether they do have certain educational background, or if they have certain certifications or not, whether they serve in the supervisory role when the supervisor is out for a while. So a lot of different things like that that affect exactly what boxes they check for an employee for a particular pay period. But I just want you to understand that there is this huge swath of categories for which the employee gets paid money, of which there is this health plan buyout, and we are going to talk more about it. And there is overtime. For working overtime, they are going to get additional pay. But this category consists of all the different categories through which the employee gets added money gets added to their paycheck, as opposed to the previous slide where those are benefits where the town pays somebody else on behalf of the employee. Okay, now going further, I wanted to unwrap the municipal spending a little bit. I took all the different ways the town spends money, and they took the top 10 categories and put everything else in the other category, just so that we can kind of take a look at how it works out. Full-time employees, the big piece here. There is the total medical care, the retirement plan, overtime, department head, part-time employees, electricity, other contract services, the debt services, and the Social Security, Medicare payments are the next, and everything else is in the remaining one quarter of a circle, maybe 25% or so. What is it? 23%. Now, the numbers here may look a little askew relative to the numbers that I showed you earlier, because the way that these things are counted is somewhat different, because in different spreadsheets, the categorization is slightly different. So don't zoom in on the exact number as much as kind of relative sizes of these different wedges of the pie. These are the top 10 categories, and the remaining, all other remaining categories are within the last 23%. Now, what is important about it is that when you look at um, uh, some other things, the medical consumes 18% of the municipal budget. Okay, and they say 70% here, but I think that doesn't include certain portions that we count into the medical, life, and dental, because that one only looks at the medical. When you include the life and dental, it's going to drive up to 18%. And if you look at the categories that are on the steep climb, those are the cost of the medical, the cost of overtime, and the cost of electricity. Okay, so if you want to control the runaway spending, the best place to get started is to look at these three categories, and that's what I'm going to focus on the rest of the presentation. So let's take a um, look at the three categories. But before that, we need to understand something here. The town has contracts. Okay, we have contracts with the unions. There are 4 unions: fire union, firemen's association that represents all the firemen, the management services, the management employees are represented through the SSEA. Teamster represents 2 of the unions in town, the SEA, which is the Services Employee Association, and the police union. Okay, there are 4 unions. Majority of the town employees fall into this box, but there are some employees with whom the town has individual contracts. For example, the town manager, the fire chief, the police chief. It says fire and police. It should say fire and police chief. Um, and so there are individual contracts. And there are some third parties. Also, we have contracts with like legal services. There's a third party entity, Comcast, that provides cable service in the town as well as to the town offices and whatnot. And we also have a contract with an electric company and so forth. There are third party contracts. But the most important thing is this box here, where we have most of our employees. Now, controlling spending in in terms of the employees can only happen with the cooperation of all four unions. There is nothing that we could do on our own. We can wave a magic wand and make things happen. If the unions don't agree, then we cannot make the change. Okay, so it's very simple. We can only make the change with the unions' cooperation. All four of them, not just one, but all four of them. So let's take a look at the healthcare cost with that understanding of how the town has various contracts. Now, uh, in those contracts, town has agreed to pay the employees for the major medical, life, and the dental coverage. Okay, depending upon the contract, there is a minor contribution from the employees per year that is often dependent upon their service time as well as what union they belong to. But you can see those nuances when you look at the contracts which are available online on the Seabrook town webpage. Okay, in some of the cases, the employees also pay a portion of the deductible, but the town always pays the front end. Meaning, when the town, when they set up a HRA account, the town loads it front end with the town's contribution, and when that runs out, the employees can pay uh, the back end of the HRA amount, and how much it is a function of the contract and that we are that the employee belongs to. Now, in addition to it, the town also provides buyout. Okay, that the buyout is an interesting thing. If an employee has medical coverage through some other means outside of the town, uh, whereas the employee had the option to get it through the town but opts not to, then the town pays that employee 50% of the cost of the premium that the town would have otherwise paid to get the appropriate coverage for that person from the insurance carrier the town is working with. Okay, so the rationale here is that, well, the town actually saves 50%, and so it's a good deal for it. That's the rationale. But as you will see later on, that's not really exactly the case. There's another interesting branch to the story, and that is if both employees work for the town and one gets the town provided medical coverage that covers the second employee as well, the second employee now doesn't have to get another medical insurance. And the rationale is that, well, that saves the town money, so the town gives them 10% of this so-called saved money, which is the money the town would have otherwise spent in premium for the second employee. Okay, so these are the ways that our current contracts are structured. Now, people have often asked, how much premium does the town pay? Well, the town provides, depending upon the needs of the employee, a single person plan, a two-person plan, or a family plan. Okay, depending upon what plan that the employee opts to get from the town's cost to get the employee the appropriate premium would be 18,000 for a single person plan, 36,000 and change for a two-person plan, and 48,000 and change, almost 49,000 for a family plan. Now, if you take all of this, about 95 active employees and 23 retirees are covered under this. And the retirees have a slightly modified plan. They can get something with the drugs and without drugs, and these things have different costs. But if you add them all up, it works out to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $3.6 million. Now, the employee could opt out of these medical premiums and just take a buyout, in which case they can get a single person plan or a two-person plan or a family plan equivalent. Depending upon which plan they were eligible for that they opted out of, they get 10% of that. If they were eligible for a 10% pension, a 10% plan, sorry, single person plan that they opted out, then the town will give them 9,000 and change, which is half of 18,000. If they opted out of a two-person plan, then they will get 18,000 and change, which is half of 36,000. And if they opted out of a family plan, then the town will give them $313.86 and say thank you very much. Now, if two employees are working for the town and one is opting into uh, the premium here, the other one will get $1,800 or $3,600 or $4,800, depending upon whether the second a person needed a single person plan or a two-person plan or a family plan. Okay, I hope this information is clear to you. If not, pause and read these numbers once more. Yeah, these numbers are correct. Now, the buyout is provided to the rest of the employees. So the rest of the employees on the 50 or 10% buyout plan that costs over $500,000 to the town per year. Okay, that is a straight buyout. But there are other costs, and we'll talk about that later. Now, in most of the private industries, the employee participates in the healthcare costs. Typically, employees will pay about 20% of the premium, and the employee will get no buyout. If they opt not to take the healthcare, the companies will normally not give any buyout. And also, if there is any payment at all that the employer makes for HRA to the employee, it will be where the employee pays the front end and the employer will pay the back end. If we were to adopt these types of things for our for the town employees, the town could save about $1.3 million. Now, here is another interesting side effect of it. If the employee has a skin in the game, then no matter what the premium is, if they are paying 20% of it, then they will cooperate with the town and they will be motivated to do plan shopping. Okay, so that we always go for the least expensive plan. That'll help the employee and that'll help the town. Right now, there is no incentive to want to support any plan shopping because it costs the employee nothing. All the increases are borne by the taxpayers, so there is really no incentive to do any plan shopping. But if the situation were to change, there will be motivation for plan shopping, and that could save even more money to the taxpayers. Okay, nothing complicated about this. Now, there is disincentive to reduce the medical cost. Okay, this is very interesting side effect. Um, Now, the employee on the medical buyout gets an automatic pay increase when the medical premiums go up because they get 50%, not a fixed amount, 50% of what the town would have otherwise paid in their eligible medical coverage premium cost. So if that premium cost were to go up in a given year, then they get an automatic bump up. Okay, from 2022, 23 to 24, the town is going to be hit with a 13.5% increase in the medical premium cost. So that means whoever was on the buyout gets a 13.5% increase to their buyout. So a person who was receiving 24,000 and change in 2023 for a family plan would now get a bump up of $3,282.37 in 2024. They didn't have to do anything. They don't have to do anything. Just sit quiet and they will see a bump up in their paycheck. All because the medical cost went up. It's a pretty good system, isn't it? Pretty good system for the employees. Now, and there are other disincentives to moving out of the current medical plan and go to more economical one, and we will talk about that later on. Now, the town did work very hard, the board of selectmen, to come up with that self-insured plan. As you all know, working for the private industry, that most of you have your companies have self-insured plan, which means your company basically finances your healthcare costs, but the administration of it is left to a healthcare administrator, and there is a fee paid for it. But there is a total savings because your healthcare is not financed by the health insurance company. Now, we looked into it, and that would have saved the town 13.1% in the medical expenses from 23 to 24. Instead of going up 13.5%, it would have gone down 13.1%. Okay. And however, such a drop in the medical cost has a negative impact. And the negative impact is that if you are anybody who is on a family buyout will see a reduction in their paycheck of 3,185.11 in 2024. That's because their premium became 13.1% cheaper in 24 compared to 2023. So this, why would anybody want to take less money, right? And this kind of creates a natural disincentive for people to want to look for any way to go to a more competitive healthcare plan by the town. Okay, so we have a problem. Our system is actually set up right now not to ever see the medical costs go down, always go up, because the employees always gain every time the medical cost goes up, and the taxpayers always end up paying. Okay, so there is built-in incentive in the system, which is very troublesome. So changing the current healthcare benefits will be tough because it affects people's paycheck, dollars and cents, without really tough and committed board members. This essential change will never going to happen. Okay, for this to happen, the board of selectmen will have to be tough, and they will have to be committed. That's the only way it's going to happen. So let's move off from there and let's look at the overtime. Okay, uh, now if you look at the additional employee pay, big portion of it is the overtime. 8% of the municipal budget goes into paying the overtime to the employees. There's no overtime in private industry, folks. By and large, if you are in the private industry, overtime is nothing but inefficiency in the system. No one gets paid any overtime. Okay, the but municipality routinely sets aside money to pay for overtime, and 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 that's pretty big amount of money. So let's get into it. If you look further into the overtime, you see the first responders are responsible for 95% of all overtime. Okay, the police is 31%, the fire is 64%. Okay, more than twice as much as the police. So, well, naturally, we want to look at the fire because that's the biggest elephant in the tent. Uh, but before we get into it, let's ask this question: how do we control overtime? Well, once again, it's not magical. There are only a couple of things we could do. One is that we could reduce the triggers to the overtime payment. Okay, what are the things in the way that we operate that causes overtime in the first place, and see if we can plug those holes. Second, reduce the overtime pay. Okay, well, that sounds really bad, right? If you say, well, hey, wait a second here, when somebody is spending the time doing the town work when they don't have to, it's reasonable to pay them time and a half, right? So hold that thought, because we'll come back to it. I have a question for you, okay, for those math enthusiasts here. If an hourly wage of an employee is $30.09, okay, and the employee does overtime, what should be the hourly rate for the employee? Should it be $45.14, $39.93, $79.95, or $60.18? Okay, do the math. When I posed the question at the library yesterday, when I presented it in person, majority of the people picked $45.14, which happens to be exactly 1.5 times 30.09. And I have to tell them that whereas their math is correct, the way they learned it in school, it is not correct the way that it is actually done in the town of Seabrook. Okay, so let me tell you how the math is done in the town of Seabrook. The employee makes $30.09 per hour, right? There it is. Then to that is added $7.28. Well, where does that come from? Well, this employee happens to get $15,900 worth of sick buyout that year, which if you divide that by 2184, which is the product of 52 weeks and 42 hours a week that the firemen work, and this is an example for a fireman, and this is an example, it's not any particular person, then this 15,900 divided by 2184 works out to be $7.28. And this employee also happens to get the healthcare buyout, family buyout of $24,313.85 that you saw earlier. And you divide that by 2184, that works out to be $11.13 per hour. This person also happens to get a uniform allowance of $950 a year. Divide that by 2184, that adds another 43 cents to the hour. Also gets call box incentive of $500. Divide that by 2184, that works out to be about 23 cents. Add them all up, that works out to a number that's a little north of $49. But that's the base. Multiply the whole thing by 1.5, what do you get? $73.95. And that, folks, is the overtime pay, overtime rate for the employee who makes $30.09 in this example. Now, I will tell you that would this always be the case? No. Different employees have different base rate. Different employees have different sets of benefits, not benefits, additional pays that gets included into their overtime rate calculation. And so, depending upon the combinations of the different additional pays that the town provides them with, they get folded into a formula like this, and the overtime is calculated as that as the basis. So often you will see the overtime rates for employees minimum over 100%. Okay, so it's 150% actually. It would be 170%, 200%, 250%, and whatnot. And in this example, it happens to be 2.45 or 245% of the base. And that's what 73.95 is. So every hour this employee works overtime, the employee makes equivalent of 2 hours and 2.75, I'm going to say about 2.5 hours of working regular hours. It's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Many people don't understand that. Okay, this is one of the reasons why the overtime pay is so much in this town. Okay, now the healthcare buyout is another, has greater impact than meets the eye. This is an interesting side artifact. You remember that I told you earlier that the healthcare buyout puts directly into the employee's pocket the 24,313 when it's on a family plan. I'm just using family plan as an example. And the numbers will be different depending upon whether they're a single plan or a two-person plan. Now, because the person happens to be in the family plan, and as you saw in the earlier chart, you take that number, divide that by their hours they are entitled to work for the year, which is 2184. That is $11.13 that gets added to their overtime pay. And now you calculate it based on the number of overtime hours they work. Voila! That puts another $15,000 in their pocket just merely because they are taking healthcare buyout. Because the healthcare buyout puts money directly into their pocket, but also becomes basis of calculation of their overtime pay. So that gets a secondary kicker. Okay, this is a very well kept secret. Most people do not know this, do not understand that, but they must. Okay, This is how sinister the overtime, I'm sorry, the healthcare buyout is and the overtime calculations are. Now, when you talk to people who work for the town, they will often tell you, well, I'm taking the buyout because it's a good deal for the town, because the town is saving 50%. Well, not exactly the case. You know why? Because when the healthcare buyout is taken as the basis of the calculation of the overtime hourly rate, and they get paid on that, the actual savings to the town is far less than 50% of them opting out of the town provided medical plan. So if everybody were to take the medical plan and no buyout, the total impact on the town is not going to be huge. It'll be much smaller than what people think. So we'll be just better off abolishing the healthcare buyout and putting everybody, you are on the town provided healthcare, period. But for that to happen, we need to have cooperation from the unions to make the change, and I doubt if the unions will agree to it, because that will mean reduction to the pay to the employees. That means the taxpayers will have to continue to finance that. So in order to better understand what drives the overtime, we need to understand what's happening. Well, the population in Seabrook has been decreasing at a rate of 0.9% per year over the last 5 years, uh, whereas the fire department has claimed that the cumulative annual growth rate has been going up double digits. Okay, why would the calls at the fire station keep growing so alarmingly fast while the town population is going down? Don't we want to understand the reason? I think that seems reasonable, right? It will debunk false claims, right? Because you may have heard people say that, well, there is a double and triple digit. I mean, the population in this town doubled and tripled from 2001, when we last hired additional full-time firefighters. So they are due for more firefighters. Well, the actual Census Bureau document says otherwise. Okay, so I looked into the Granite Stats, which is a state database for the population growth data census, and here is the URL. Anybody can go and look at it, or you can simply type Granite Stats in the search bar on your browser, and it will take you here, and then you look for New Hampshire. You will get this data, and you can put Seabrook, and you get the Seabrook specific data. And it is the source is U.S. Census Bureau, and it's a population division, New Hampshire Office of Strategic Initiative. That's what publishes this data. So these are not somebody sitting in the basement, their mom's basement, putting these numbers up. This is a state provided information, so it's very reliable. And if you look at these numbers, it will bear out that the population in Seabrook has been diminishing 0.9% over the last 5 years. So when you hear all these claims the town has grown 2 times, 3 times since 2001, please don't believe it. It is true that we have had more commercial growth in this town, but people don't live in the commercial buildings. People don't live in Walmart. People don't live in Market Basket. People come to work. People come to shop, but that's not where they live. Yes, there have been more real estate development growth in this town, but the population hasn't necessarily grown. So issue always, people say, oh, wait a minute here. We get calls from the Route 1 corridor quite a bit because there's people coming. Well, that's where we need some data to understand what it is. So we'll talk about this in a second. Now, we need to also understand the call types that are coming in. How many calls are for fire? How many are for medical? How many are for emergency? How many are non-emergency type calls? Okay, it's good to understand that. Is that not? Because it will help us understand the relative importance of fire and paramedics, also the relative importance of the emergency and non-emergency calls and so forth. And it will help us understand, the triggers for dispatch. Because dispatch means somebody goes out that costs the town money, somebody comes in to fill in for them in the station, that costs overtime, that costs money. So we really need to understand this dynamics in order that we control the overtime. So we need this data. Next, we also need to have a call distribution over property classes. How many calls are coming in from residential, commercial, industrial, and utility property classes? Why is it important? Because we want to understand if the Seabrook residents are subsidizing Seabrook commercial. Because think about it. Who is the Seabrook commercials really benefiting? We have a bunch of people coming from Massachusetts to escape the state sales tax, and they come to Seabrook to shop. So any subsidy that we provide to the Seabrook commercials are really, in fact, subsidizing the Massachusetts shoppers. Why would the Seabrook residents subsidize Massachusetts shoppers? Is it a reasonable question? We want to understand that, don't we? And to understand that, you need to understand where the calls are coming from on a property class basis. We also want to understand how many calls are coming from the top 10 frequent callers. We don't want to know their names for privacy purposes, but we want to know as a collection, if you take the top 10 frequent callers, how much are those? Because if there are frivolous callers who abuse services, and if the taxpayers are paying for it, we want to better understand what can we do about it. What can we actually do about it within the limits of the law? I don't know, but we need to take a look, don't we? So we need to have this kind of a data. Now, we also need to understand how many of the medical calls were billed, how many of them were collected, and what money was forgiven. Because when Seabrook Fire Department ambulance service gets a call, if the caller is a Seabrook resident who has no insurance, they get no bill. In other words, the cost of servicing them gets peanut buttered over the taxpayers. If the caller happens to be a Seabrook resident with insurance, then their insurance will get billed, but the Seabrook Fire Department will only take what the insurance gives them. All the difference will be forgiven. That's what that forgiven means. The difference in the amount will be peanut butter over the taxpayers. Okay. The third category is if the ambulance call is coming from somebody who is not a Seabrook resident, then their insurance company will be billed and will collect it. And the difference between the actual cost of the service and what the insurance covered will be now billed to the person, and the person will have to pay. Now we have to stay on top of them like anything else and make a collection. If we forgive that, once again, we are taking that money and we are peanut buttering over the taxpayers, and that is not fair. So we need to better understand this, right? So that's why this question is important. What is the tax burden we are creating and to the taxpayers with our generous current ambulance policies? And if there are some unfairness, we need to take some action to fix it, of course, all within the limits of the law. And finally, that we also need to understand how many off-duty firefighters were called in for station coverage. Okay, and when they come here, what is the amount of time they actually spend? Because when they come here, they get paid a minimum hours, like 2 hours. Now, we need to right size it. Why are they getting a 2 hour mandatory minimum if the average time that they spend here, the median time that they spend here, is well within an hour, including their commute time? So these are things that we need to take a look at. So that's why having all this data is very important. That will allow us to do data-driven decisions. So these are the types of data that I have requested from the fire department, but I have not been given, and they have resisted giving me this data, and the resistance is continuing. And my question is that, what are you hiding? Just give us the data so we can better understand these things. So I think that all of us taxpayers would like to know these things. And this should be all available to the taxpayers. We are the ones who are writing the tax checks. Now, do you agree with these questions? If you do, or if you don't, write comment down below, okay? It's very important that you give me your comments. That way I know what you feel. At the meeting yesterday when I presented it in person, by and large, it was a unanimous response that yes, they do want answers to these questions, and they do agree with these questions. Now, there are other factors driving the overtime, okay? Like any increase to the time off, be it vacation, personal time, etc., that gets negotiated and provided to the union. If it were to happen, then that's going to reduce the regular work hours and it's going to drive up the need for more overtime. Okay? Because there are only so many hours. The more time you allocate for them to take off, they have less time to work, and that means there's going to be more need for overtime. So that's one trigger. Also, that every $1 increase in the medical buyout or other additional payment types that contribute to the basis of the overtime rates will increase the overtime rate by $1.50. Okay, so these are other ways in which the overtime costs are going up. The reality is the way the system is set up right now, since the medical costs keep going up year after year after year, the overtime costs will keep going up and up and up and up and up. Okay, and if any changes are made to their vacation time and so forth, in which they are given more time off and so forth, because that's going to require more overtime usage, overtime costs will go up even more. So these are the factors that drive up the overtime costs. So if you want to control overtime, we need to take a look at all these things. Now, so the controlling the overtime costs, if we conclude that can be done by overtime, overall overtime must be reduced, and the overtime pay should be reduced as well. And there, make sure that you understand we are not talking about taking away the time and a half. We are talking about making changes so that it is not too much higher than 1.5. Okay, time and a half. Electricity is another thing where the costs are going up. We all know that because we pay our electric bills ourselves. The town had a contract that's going to get renewed. The town manager has been working diligently on it, and we are going to have a new electricity plan that is going to be more favorable in terms of pricing for us. Also, as the new electrical devices go bad in town, all devices that require electricity go bad, we will always go to a more energy efficient type of device, and that over time will bring down our electricity consumption, and that it will bring down the electricity costs. So that's also okay. So the question is, you look at this, a lot of things that you heard sounds outrageous, right? Then the natural question is, how did we get here? How did it get this way? How did we get here? So the tendency would be to say, well, the employees are gouging us. Well, I'm here to protect the employees and tell you that don't blame the employees, okay? Because if you or I were in their shoes, we would want to maximize our income too. There is nothing wrong with people wanting to do the best for their families. So don't blame the employees. They are not to be blamed on this. Now, can you blame the unions? Well, you can't blame the unions because, after all, what do the unions do? They represent the employees and they want to do the very best for their employees. So they are always going to ask for the sky and the star and the moon. That's natural. So don't blame them. The blame is squarely on the past Board of Selectmen, okay? Because the Board of Selectmen control the purse strings in the town, and they were responsible for setting the policies. Okay. Unfortunately, due to lax policies and kind of a lackadaisical approach to the job, they have kind of succumbed to, uh, you know, um, uh, uh, trading benefit for votes, and they kind of drove up all the benefits like you see them they are right now. Okay. It is a lazy way to do politics, but that's what has been done up to now. So it's a bad situation, folks. So the people who have been on the Board of Selectmen for many years in this town have brought us where we are right now. Okay, and I'm on the board, and I'm telling you that it's a sorry situation. But you know that if you want to dig out of a ditch, the first step you need to take is to stop digging. Okay, so don't keep spending, you know, spenders uh, to the board. Okay, because you will not see anything more than continuously increasing town spending. Okay, so stop digging. Okay, simple message to you. Another way that we can reduce the town spending is to eliminate subsidies. Subsidies are basically a user of a service doesn't pay for things that they are using, but someone else does, and that's a subsidy. Okay. There are many different subsidies. One is inter-property class subsidies. For example, if there is a favorable assessment of the commercial property class and not so for the residential property class, then the residential property class is going to take the brunt of the taxation, and they're going to end up subsidizing the commercial property tax. And we tried very hard to take a look at the close look at it this year, but we didn't succeed. But we are going to continue to push forth and try to do it in the upcoming year, 2024. We need to take a look at, first of all, not all intuition is fact. Sometimes what feels very intuitively right needs to be proven to be correct through actual hard data. So we are in the process of getting the data to understand if there is any subsidies going on at all, and if there is, what can we do to fix it. So we are working on it. That's number one. And number two also is the water and sewer charges. Okay, up until now, the sewer bills collected by the town is less than the money that the sewer department requires to operate the sewer service. So they are basically drawing money from the general fund, which is funded by the taxpayer dollars. So we end up basically taking the deficit of the sewer and we are peanut buttering it over the entire tax base. That is a subsidy by every taxpayer to keep the sewer service whole. Okay, so that needs to be addressed, and we have done something to address it, and I'll talk about that shortly. And police service and fire service, are there subsidies here? Meaning, are there frivolous callers to the police department, frivolous callers to fire department, and because if so, then they are being subsidized by the rest of the taxpayers, and we need to take a look at, and we need to see what we can do to fix that. I don't know if there is, but only good data will reveal if that is the case. Now, we need to do whatever we can, but we need to do everything, of course, within the constraints of the law. We can't just do things willy-nilly. We got to take a look at what the law allows us to do, and we have to stay within the parameters of the law. Now, in the case of water and sewer, we worked very hard this year and made water and sewer into a true enterprise. By true enterprise, it means that the water and sewer department will have to, going forward, live within their income, which is going to be entirely based on the water bill that they send to us and collect. Okay, the cost of the operations and the cost of capital improvement will all be paid out of the monies that they collect in the form of the water and sewer bill. Now, the another mandate to the water and sewer department in going to the enterprise is also that they maintain our multi-$100 million water and sewer infrastructure in great working shape for uh, 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 time indefinitely into the future. We want them to anticipate things that are getting old that needs to be fixed and find out how much it's going to cost when that needs to be done, and then the monies need to be appropriated in the previous years, adding to it into the budget, so that when we get there's monies available for doing these things. All these things now become the responsibility of the water department. Okay, now the changes were enacted about a month or so ago in the Board of Selectmen meeting, but we were already in the last 3-month quarter cycle for the water and sewer bill, which will go out early next year. So next bill that we receive will not reflect the new rates, but the second bill that we receive next year, which will be based on the first 3 months, will be based on the new rates. Um, and so, look for it. And with that, there will be a benefit that the money that the general fund or the taxpayers will be paying to subsidize the sewer bill will be gone, because now all the monies will be collected through the water and sewer bill entirely. Okay, so that is, you should anticipate that this is a success story for us for 2024. But we certainly need to do more work here. Finally, that we also need to cultivate new revenue sources. We already have NextEra as paying about a third of our tax levy in this town, but we need to monetize our town resources if at all that's possible. Are there any excess resources that we have that we could monetize by selling them, or allowing or serving our adjacent communities and so forth, water or sewer or whatever the case may be. We need to take a look at that, because any money that we raise there will go right down to the bottom line and will help the taxpayers. Okay, but when we do that, we need to do it with the condition that there will never be a negative impact on the Seabrook taxpayers. Now, we also need to take a look at fees and fines for different things, because we want to make sure that the fines and the fees that are collected are commensurate with the cost the town incurs in whatever that it pertains to. Okay, so that is another thing. We went through and revised a bunch of fees and fines, and I think that we may still need to do some more work there. Okay, so we'll continue to work on cultivating more revenue sources. Okay. So with all that said, I want to have some closing charts here. The first one is that I want you to watch out for these things, okay? I want to summarize it here. The default budget presented to the voters isn't what you may think it is. The default budget is supposed to be current year's operating budget, all the contractual obligations for the next year, and adjustment made on that with any one-time expenses that we had, okay? Now, unfortunately, if you go back and look at the history of the way that we have done the default budget in the town of Seabrook in the past several years, the default budget has been sort of used by loading things that we did not want to give the users a choice on. Okay, so we have used the default budget as a sort of a protection zone. If we want to spend money on something that we don't want the users to say, taxpayers to say no to, we kind of voted it into the default budget. Okay, now that is not a very ethical thing to do, but that's what we have done for many years in this town. Okay, and so you need to ask questions. You need to understand what is in the default budget, so you can be very, very explicit about that. Okay, not that necessarily you can do a whole lot, because when you are presented with the default budget and the proposed budget, you got to vote for one or the other. Okay, and so there's nothing you can do, but knowledge is power. Okay, try and understand what went into the default budget. Ask questions, and you have the right through right to know law, no 91A, to ask for those details and get information on them. Okay, so use your rights to increase your understanding of this. Second, the COLA increases shown on the warrant articles don't always reflect the true cost. When the union contracts are negotiated, they become warrant articles, and because when the contracts are negotiated and the agreement is reached, they become what are called the tentative agreements, and the tentative agreements result in warrant articles that get placed on the ballot, and you get to vote on it. And when you read the warrant article, it'll tell you what union and what contract it is, and it will tell you that these are the COLA increases that we agreed to per the agreements, and it will also break that down in terms of the dollar impact on your tax bill. Well, often or not often, from all I have seen so far, is that you only see the COLA increases, which is in the 33%. Remember that I told you for every $33 that's visible, there is $41 that's invisible. Of course, it's not always 41. It could be 42. It could be 40, depending upon in any given year how the ratios work out. But just know that there is more to it than what is presented. So don't just vote just on the basis of what you see on the ballot, on the warrant article. That's why it's important for you to get the ballot earlier, read the warrant articles, ask questions, understand, talk to your friends, see if they have information. Then you have to make up your mind as to which warrant article you will support, which you will not support. Information is power, so really, really try to understand that. Okay, but I want to warn you that what is presented is not everything. Another thing, don't get into conversation with anybody on the property tax rate. Okay, that's a waste of time. It's very misleading. Property tax rate is a ratio of the town budget divided by the total town assessment. Okay, so when somebody says, well, we have lowered the tax rate, so we are running the town well, no, it doesn't mean that at all. There are situations where increase the town spending enormously, but the increase in the total assessed value of the town may outpace it. In which case, even though you are spending a heck of a lot more money on the town, your tax rate will go down. And so when somebody says my tax rate went, I kept your tax rate down, so I've done a good job. No, don't buy that. That is very, very misleading. Always focus on the tax dollars. If your taxes dollars are going up, we are going in the wrong direction. Okay, that is what you need to pay attention to. Finally, the healthcare buyout is not a good deal for the town. I showed this to you earlier because it's expensive in a direct way and in an indirect way because it goes into the overtime and also is part of the basis of the town contribution to the New Hampshire retirement plan. That's the third piece. The fourth piece is it creates a natural disincentive for the employees to want to help reduce the medical costs over time for the town and hence for the taxpayers. Okay, so that is not a good deal for the taxpayers. So these are your takeaway things I would like you to watch out for. Finally, what can we do about this? You got to elect a better board of selection. Okay, you got to elect better board. If you want people to really care for your dollars, interview your people who are running for board, or take a look at the ones who are on the board and decide how they are doing, and decide on re-electing them, and decide whether these are the people who will really care for your dollars. Okay, if not, stop digging. Okay, so send better people to the board of selectmen. Send better members to the budget committee. If you are an SB2 town, the budget committee is fairly powerful. So you need to send people to the budget committee who know how to do some minimal basic accounting. There are people on the budget committee who have no accounting training at all. And what good does that do? They will vote out of the goodness of their heart or by their opinions or by their intuition. And that's not the way to do these things. This is really business. So people must have some kind of a business savvy to be able to sit on a budget committee. And that's also true for who sits on the board of selectmen as well. And then you need to educate yourself on the contracts and budgets. Don't just sit there and think that somebody else is watching out for you. No, no, no. You have to watch out for yourself. Form groups if you have to, so that you can read these things collectively and exchange ideas and come up with questions to get answers to and ask questions, analyze, understand. That's very important. Knowledge is power. And finally, active participation in the process. I think you are an active participant, otherwise you wouldn't be watching this video where, and spending more than an hour of your time. So read and understand and actively participate in the process. Now, some additional remarks here. In general, the elected officials should work on broad-based policies that uplift the entire community. Okay. Unfortunately, you often see politicians get into politics of personal favors, and you can tell right away these politicians are corrupt and lazy. Okay, so be smart to see this and understand this and avoid sending these kinds of politicians to the administration. Okay, it's really on you. It's on me as a taxpayer. Now, we should always practice data-driven decision making. Decisions should not be made on what is called common sense and intuition. It may sound good, but that's not a good way to run a business. And running a town is running a business. There are no two ways about it. And finally, we do not want any racists among us. Racism is pretty insidious and pretty bad, and racism should not be tolerated. Okay? Calling out racism and holding racists to account, even when you are not the subject of the racism, is everyone's responsibility. You may not be the subject of it, but if you see racism happening in front of you, you should call the offender, to account. That's everybody's responsibility. And finally, people who stand by and support and condone the racists are guilty of being racist themselves. Okay, it's very important not to support racists. It is not good for now, it's not good ever. So that is something to remember. All right, with that said, we have come to the conclusion. You can send your comments down below. I welcome comments. I welcome questions. I'm very accessible. My telephone number is on the town website. My email address is on it. I'm very interactive. And if you want to be added to my mailing list, time to time, I reach out to people and give them useful updates. And if you want to be part of that, by all means, send me an email with your email address, and I'll and tell you that you are interested in being on my email list, and I will add you to it. Okay. At the same time, if you're on my email list right now and say, I don't want to hear from you anymore, go away, please send me an email. I'll take you off my email list. It's not very difficult. Okay. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you. Bye bye.